Across the Arabian Peninsula, there's an anomaly so immense that it seems to bend space, time, and span multiple dimensions, leaving its imprint on the history of the Gulf. Beginning with a discovery beneath the UAE uncovered in 2011, revealing traces of human presence dating back 80,000 years, to the 2024 Kuwaiti discovery of a 7,000-year-old humanoid snake figurine, the international media dubbed alien-like, that is eerily similar to figures found in Iraq a century earlier. Then there was also the wave of aerial phenomena reported over Bahrain in the early 2000s, and finally the planting in 1583 of a tree that refuses to die. What connects them all? A mystery so unlikely it may not only rewrite the origins of humanity, but also challenge our understanding of physics itself, the anomaly known as the Garden of Eden.
The reason for holding this press conference is really to make you aware of two discoveries. The first is a dry river channel that crosses the Arabian Peninsula from the Hijaz Mountains in the west all the way to the coastline of the Gulf, the Persian Gulf or the Arabian Gulf on the east, some 850 kilometers away.
In March 1993, a Boston University geologist called an emergency press conference. But what he was about to reveal, he didn't yet realize, could rewrite not just the history of the Gulf, but the entire world. The man was Farouk El-Baz, a NASA scientist turned geologist. While studying satellite images of Kuwait's desert devastation following its conflict 2 years earlier, he noticed something impossible. A vast anomaly stretching more than 500 miles, hidden beneath the sands. It was the remains of an ancient river that El-Baz believed could one day uncover immense underground reserves, impacting the future of the entire Khalij, that being Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, Oman, and of course the UAE. But others saw something different. Biblical historians claimed this was likely no ordinary river. To them, it matched the description of the Pishon, one of the 4 rivers said to sustain the first humans on Earth. If true, then El-Baz hadn't just discovered an ancient waterway. He had stumbled onto the most important archaeological find in history, the location of the Garden of Eden itself. Now this episode is divided into 2 parts, each presenting alternate yet complementary theories that the Garden of Eden was a real place, covering the entirety of the Gulf. The first theory explores the Gulf Oasis hypothesis, which argues that the region was once a vast, fertile landscape, a setting that may have been the very ground on which Eden was its center. The second ventures into more arcane territory, suggesting the idea that Eden existed not only as a physical location on Earth, but simultaneously across multiple dimensions linked to the region. Both of these theories, when presented together, not only indicates why the Gulf may historically be the most important location on the planet scientifically, but also how its various religions and folklores, including and predating the Abrahamic faiths, could provide evidence as to why alleged unexplained phenomena and discoveries are found here, all linked to Eden and an anomalous race of beings known as the Anunnaki. Now in the hunt for the Garden of Eden, many places outside of the Khalij have been suggested and grown in popularity. Outside of the Gulf and what was once ancient Mesopotamia and its immediate neighbors, including Iran, Turkey, and Iraq, other popular guesstimates for Eden include Ethiopia, Egypt, and Sudan, and bizarrely enough as far afield as India, and even according to some groups, a place called Missouri in the United States. Going on the assumption that Eden was a physical historical place, the first line of evidence comes from geology. Genesis describes a single river watering the garden, then dividing into four: the Tigris, the Euphrates, the Pishon, and the Gihon. Satellite imagery has revealed ancient riverbeds under Arabia, such as Wadi Batan, thought to be the lost Pishon. The Gulf Oasis theory adds weight here. Before the sea rose between 7000 and 6000 BCE, the Arabian Gulf was not a sea at all, but a fertile plain with rivers and freshwater springs. Oceanographers have even confirmed the presence of ancient aquifers beneath the seabed, exactly what you would expect if a lush environment had been drowned by rising seas. Archaeology provides the second line of evidence. If Eden was the birthplace of humanity, we would expect to find early farming villages, temples, and symbolic sites. And that is precisely what emerges. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, Neolithic settlements in Iraq and Iran, the Bronze Age civilization of Dilmun in Bahrain, and important sites in the Emirates, such as Jebel Buhais. In the UAE specifically, scientists have identified traces of ancient rivers and buried channels beneath Abu Dhabi's sands, proof that the land once carried flowing water. Excavations at Jebel Faya uncovered stone tools as old as 125,000 years, while cemeteries at Jebel al-Buhais show that large communities lived there over 7,000 years ago. Taken together, this evidence ties directly into the Gulf Oasis theory, and if that's true, then Eden wasn't a mythic garden. It was an entire civilization. In the next chapter of this episode, we'll step into the more fringe ideas, interpretations that, at least in part, echo elements of Islamic cosmology. These theories suggest that this civilization may not have been entirely of this world, but partially connected to a vast extra-dimensional location via a thin spot, with some of the most striking physical evidence for this perspective in Bahrain. But before venturing there, let's ground ourselves in what science can firmly establish: the likelihood that the Arabian Gulf itself was the setting of the Garden of Eden, or a location similar to it. Now, the Gulf Oasis theory developed by Jeffrey Rose contains several key elements that support the idea that it may have been the true home of the Garden of Eden. First, the location. Beyond Mesopotamia, this theory points to the submerged plains of the Gulf Basin, and here we extend that view to include the wider corner of the Arabian Peninsula. Second, the environment. With sea levels lower during the Ice Age, a fertile plain was exposed, green, watered, and perfectly habitable. Third, the archaeology. Finds across the UAE, Iraq, and Bahrain, which we'll explore later in this episode, suggest a civilization that once flourished around this oasis. Fourth, the flood. The story of Prophet Nuh alayhi salam may echo the drowning of this world as sea levels rose and the Gulf Basin was swallowed. And finally, the water sources. The theory points to a convergence of great rivers flowing into the Gulf, several of which are named in the Bible. And together with hidden aquifers, they would have made this one of the most fertile landscapes on Earth. Although Elbaz, the former NASA scientist who identified the ancient Kuwaiti River in 1993, never directly linked his discovery to Pishon in Eden, many others have. Geologist Carol Hill, for example, points out that at least two of the four other rivers of Genesis, the Tigris and Euphrates, are real waterways that once flowed into the Gulf. Their dry channels can still be traced today, with Elbaz's Pishon being a third. She states that this suggests the biblical writer was describing a real landscape, one almost identical to what once existed here. This matches Genesis precisely. A single river watering the land before dividing into four, linking not only Kuwait, Iraq, Iran, and Saudi Arabia, but also the UAE further south, with its archaeological record, evidence that continues to bolster the Gulf Oasis theory. However, out of all of these countries, there is one place that may hold the final missing piece of this puzzle, the key to resolving the mystery of Eden's true location, linking tangible geological and archaeological research with both ancient regional lore and the paranormal, that country being Bahrain. There is a popular idea that the Sumerian deity, Enki, played a central role in humanity's earliest creation stories. Some writers have argued that his account overlaps with the Anunnaki myths, and even with the biblical story of the Garden of Eden. This idea suggests that ancient extraterrestrial contact may have influenced early civilization and religion, but it goes further than that. Known as the paleo-contact theory, the idea was first seriously considered in 1954 and gained momentum in the 1960s. However, this hypothesis was not merely about alien contact, but those aliens genetically engineering the first humans. It was in the 1970s when the highly influential yet controversial author Zecharia Sitchin presented alleged proof of this, found in ancient Sumerian texts. However, while he has since been strongly criticized for not only exhibiting an alarming lack of academic rigor in his research, but also possibly the wholesale fabrication of it, modern writers such as Paul Wallace argue that today global civic institutions are actively concealing proof of some kind of ancient paleo-contact. According to this theory, ancient sites such as Turkey's Göbekli Tepe, which we explored last episode, alongside those found across the wider Middle East and Latin America, are all evidence of this. Whether or not there's truth to these claims is a discussion for another episode. What concerns us today is not what may have happened in the ancient past to early humans, but where. On the 11th of August 2006, 13 years after Farouk El-Baz's announcement, the Gulf Daily News published several eyewitness accounts above the skies of Bahrain, one of Kuwait's closest neighbors. In the article, a wave of sightings had been observed above and around Bahrain's Sitra Causeway following the Gulf Daily News publishing of a photo taken by individuals of a UAP. Among this wave of sightings, the most notable testimony came from a Pakistani national visiting relatives in Bahrain around that time. In the August 11th report, he described seeing a green revolving light, which turned white before it vanished. 7 witnesses in total saw this phenomenon, with the object visible for only a few seconds before disappearing into the clouds at around 7 p.m. But how does this relate to the Kuwaiti discovery made over a decade earlier? Well, Al-Bahrain is home to one of the region's most perplexing mysteries, the Shajarat al-Hayat, otherwise known as the Tree of Life. It's a mystery because it simply should not exist. An anomaly because scientists cannot explain how it's the only tree in the area that can self-sustain itself, while local lore says this tree has roots that stretches across time and perhaps dimensions into the Garden of Eden itself. And it was here that at least one of our 2006 witnesses encountered the UAP, claiming the object hovered directly over the tree before vanishing into the clouds. Like much of the Gulf, Bahrain's desert environment is unforgiving, and geologists have yet to reach a consensus on how the Tree of Life continues to survive. While all other plants in the area wither within days, let alone years, this tree has thrived for over 4 centuries, leading to a range of folkloric explanations for its seemingly supernatural survival. Some say the tree is haunted by jinn, since tradition holds that trees are often their natural homes. Others believe it has been enchanted by some unknown force. But most striking of all are those who claim it survives because of an ancient Sumerian curse, a curse tied to the Garden of Eden itself, creating the first of many connections to the Kuwaiti discovery and suggesting that Bahrain may, in fact, be the true home of Eden. Scientists have struggled for decades to explain its survival. Some propose that the tree is fed by an underground stream nearly 2 miles away, though no real evidence has ever confirmed this. Others argue it draws moisture directly from the air or even from the sand itself. But not only is this unlikely, even if that were true, it cannot explain why every other tree, even of the same species, have failed to survive. This is why, despite being only 400 years old, many still link the Tree of Life's existence back to the ancient Sumerians, and perhaps to the garden itself. In our last episode, we reintroduced the figure of Enki. Some say he was a fallen angel, others an extraterrestrial. Historians argue he was neither, but merely a mythological deity for the people of that time. According to lore, Enki was an ancient Sumerian deity of water and fertility, and with that role, it's no wonder why some link him to the Tree of Life's immortal existence. But regardless of who or what he was, Enki has long been tied to the Garden of Eden itself. How? He was said to be among the most powerful figures in Mesopotamian mythology, and unlike most, he was believed to have lived physically on Earth, in a place called Dilmun. Ancient Sumerian texts describe Dilmun as a land without sickness, without death, a bright and pure land where fresh water flowed endlessly. In other words, the original Garden of Eden. But here's where this gets strange. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, archaeologists uncovered overwhelming evidence that Dilmun was not a myth, but right here in Bahrain. As of 2025, a treasure trove of Sumerian artifacts are still being unearthed to such a high frequency. UNESCO now regards Bahrain as one of the most important heritage sites on the planet. A land whose roots not only stretch back to the 3rd millennium BC, but according to some, the beginning of history. Now, Enki remains one of the most dangerous figures in this entire discussion. As just mentioned, in addition to being merely viewed as a fictional deity, depending on interpretation, he has also been framed as a real supernatural entity, a lizard-like extraterrestrial, or as some theorists argue, both. Within this context, the rest of the Anunnaki are also viewed similarly. Some Christian groups label them as angelic beings that became demons, while paleocontact theorists argue they are a powerful alien race, with Enki as one of the principal figures, if not the most important, and that his race of beings still exists today. If he did represent an advanced non-human intelligence, then the Mesopotamians who recorded his story may have interpreted his advanced technologies as divine, craft capable of traversing not only space, but perhaps dimensions. Fringe think tanks, such as Exopolitics, argue that the Gulf rests upon an interdimensional portal that explains the unusual concentration of anomalous phenomena in the region. This could perhaps account for the wave of well-documented UAP sightings across Iran and Kuwait during the 1970s and early 80s, and more recently the discovery of Ubaid period figurines unearthed in Iraq in 1919 and Kuwait in 2024, depicting reptilian, or what the media dubbed as alien-like, beings. Now, when paired with the highly speculative and controversial notion that Enki and the Anunnaki are in fact lizard-like aliens, their alleged presence on early Earth, in the Garden of Eden no less, takes on an entirely new and problematic light. So, to summarize, following the Gulf Oasis hypothesis, whether or not we assume that the entirety of the Gulf and most of Mesopotamia was Eden, we can still say with some certainty that ancient Dilmun, centered in Bahrain, was remembered in Sumerian myth as a kind of paradise, and that Enki himself was closely tied to its waters and its creation. When writers like Sitchin claimed that these mythological figures were literal alien visitors, later recast by others as reptilian beings, the imagery of serpent-like humanoids, and the uncanny stylization of Ubaid figurines discovered in Iraq and Kuwait 100 years apart ensures that the idea refuses to fade. And while mainstream Assyriologists and historians reject these literal alien claims with strong arguments, an anomaly like the Tree of Life complicates matters, as its lore has become linked on several levels to the same serpent motif that appears across the world, most famously appearing in the creation story of man, a story set in the Garden of Eden. While this line of thought is far from accepted scholarship and relies heavily on unprovable hypotheses, it raises an important point. Such speculation did not originate with modern fringe writers. Nearly a century earlier, the Sufi scholar Abdul Wahid Yahya described thin points in the world, where the boundaries between dimensions have become frayed. One such place, he suggested, was in the northern Gulf. If such liminal type spaces exist, then perhaps Eden itself is physically located at the threshold of one such space. A realm that was both a physical landscape across the Gulf and a metaphysical garden connected to heaven. A transdimensional location that can accommodate both Christian and Islamic understandings of the same location. Again, this is a highly speculative notion, but if the Tree of Life in Bahrain, surviving against all rational explanation, could then be understood as a remnant or node of such a liminal location, existing on a quantum level where time, space, and thought converge, then it serves as a reminder that the divine can manifest in ways that transcend ordinary perception. So when it comes to the idea of the entire Gulf, what we now call the GCC, being Eden, an idea supported by the Gulf Oasis hypothesis, what does pre-Islamic Arabian lore tell us, especially about figures like the Anunnaki and Enki? Unfortunately, there's no single direct equivalent to Enki in Southern Arabian tradition, but taken together, deities such as Al-Mukah, associated with irrigation, Athtar, linked with rain, Anbi, connected with water regulation and law, and Wood, whose symbol was the serpent, all together reflect different aspects of his character. Note, this is all just theoretical, but if Eden was the Gulf basin, partly submerged beneath the Gulf, partly existing across other dimensions, then it makes sense that its Enki survived not under one Mesopotamian name, but through multiple local figures, each preserving a part of his role. Although we can forever debate and discuss the scientific and paranormal theories of Eden existing in the Gulf, one thing holds true. The idea of it being located here has birthed a positive social and cultural benefit to the region. In Iraq, there is a location known as Adam's Holy Tree, or the Tree of Knowledge, not to be confused with Bahrain's Tree of Life. Here, a fringe Islamic belief encourages thousands of Muslims to visit every year, believing that praying there brings blessings, forgiveness, and the realization of dreams. This is not a common practice in Islam, because the majority of scholars believe Eden is either in heaven or located in an extra-dimensional location not on Earth. Yet this tree also attracts Christian pilgrims who believe it is literally the same tree from the biblical book of Genesis, making it one of the few places on Earth where Muslims and Christians share their faith together. Iraq's Tree of Knowledge used to stand alone in an area located between the Euphrates and Tigris rivers, and in 2005, the Ministry of Water Resources spent 6 million Iraqi dinars, about $5,000, to turn it into a tourism spot where a large billboard states, in Arabic and English, that this spot was blessed by the visit of the Prophet Ibrahim, peace be upon him, 2,000 years ago. As for the Tree of Life in Bahrain, although it continues to anomalously survive the desert elements, it has not been able to protect itself from the human element. With Bahrain's urban expansion and road building in recent decades, access to the tree has become easier for the public. Unfortunately, this has led to vandals carving their names into its trunk, and even burning its bark as part of a religious ritual. Fortunately, the government stepped in 2013, surrounding the tree with a concrete wall and pathway to prevent further damage. And today, it remains one of the Gulf's most enduring scientific and potentially supernatural anomalies. But it is far from the only one. But what do you think? Leave your comment and let's debate. Do you believe Eden even exists and possibly somewhere in the Gulf? Or maybe it was further afield, like in Turkey, Ethiopia, or beyond space and time? And if it is connected to an extra-dimensional utopia, could there really be other thin spots that connect to far darker realms, like what both Abdulwahid Yahya and exopolitics claim? Considering an increase in paranormal reports and UAP sightings not only in the region but across the world garnering public government investigation, maybe the concept of thin spots could soon be considered as an official plausible explanation. Anyway, if you've stayed with us this far, thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and inshallah we'll see you soon in the next episode.